Venice, who's challenging the water. Right now we'll have an opportunity to hear a little bit about the brave man from Hungary who challenged Viktor Orbán. So this is truly, I'm truly honored, and it's my great pleasure to invite you to a special discussion with Mr. Márki-Zay. You can clap your hands right now.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, Peter Márki-Zay is a Hungarian politician, economist, historian, and also the mayor of Hódmezővásárhely.
Excellent.
Thank you. I tried. So, my first question is, I think that everyone is really curious about this. So, please tell us about the Hungary and Viktor Orbán. How the things are going on right now?
Well, 2 years ago, we tried to pretty much use the same formula that Poland tried this last fall, which is a united opposition strategy against a dictatorship, unfortunately with a very different result. And according to political scientists, the main difference between the Polish success and the Hungarian failure is that Orbán's system was already a full-blown, a fully developed authoritarian regime, let's face it, a dictatorship. The opposition in Hungary didn't have access to state media. Orbán was controlling all but 3 FM radios in the country, all daily newspapers, all television channels. There's only one which allows opposition politicians to appear and is not directly forbidden, so to say, but even that one is controlled by Fidesz. So media is one major factor. The second major factor was, of course, money. In order to appear on social media, on the internet, you need a lot of money to advertise, and Fidesz had 100 times more resources than the opposition. They also use secret service, electoral fraud, and so many other things. But basically, besides all the changes that they made in electoral law, which favors them, a single-round electoral system, winner compensation, foreign voters, so Hungarians living in the West supporting the opposition, had to go in person to vote at the embassies. Many of them traveled a whole day to get to London from Glasgow, for example. But those Hungarians who live in the Carpathian Basin, in Serbia, Romania, or Ukraine, for example, they could vote by mail. So it's much easier for them, and it was also collected by Fidesz activists instead of the post. So there's also electoral fraud. But the whole system, the whole propaganda, that's the main reason of Orbán's success in Hungary. People actually believed 2 years ago that if the opposition wins, then the next day they would have to go and die in Ukraine in a war, that LGBTQ activists would raid schools, and that they would perform sex change operations on kindergarteners without parental consent. It sounds ridiculous, but this is how efficient propaganda really is. So that's the secret of Orbán's rule in Hungary. It's a huge disparity in the possibilities, opportunities, financial resources between the opposition and the government. They are also using secret service openly to intimidate the opposition. They use blackmail. So many people in the opposition actually are working secretly or openly to support Orbán and not the opposition. So it's a very difficult situation. Right now, I still believe that there is a chance and there is a reason why we should stop Orbán and similar dictatorships everywhere in Europe, the same way as we must stop floodings from Venice. The same reason is for us, if we want to survive, we have to stop dictatorships from really getting commonplace in the EU. And before we would come to an early conclusion that what can happen in Hungary cannot happen elsewhere. I know that you Poles, you wouldn't jump to this conclusion because you already were at the verge of a similar system here. Although I also have to admit, with all my distinguished honor to the Polish people, that your system was also very different. Just to give you one example, Mr. Kaczynski owns a cat. Mr. Orbán owns a country. It's a huge difference. So it's not too complicated, it's not too complex to discover Mr. Putin's hand behind Orbán's maneuvers. The same way as you could discover Putin's hands and interests behind the migration crisis, behind Brexit, behind Trump, behind Salvini, Le Pen, AfD. So all this is to weaken the West, weaken a democratic free enterprise system and European integration, the North Atlantic Alliance. Of course, it's a strategic incentive for Russia, but unfortunately also that of other players. So Orbán in itself is not just a danger for Hungary, but it's a phenomenon, it's a virus that is dangerous for Germany, France, and it was also dangerous for Poland. And I wish that we can all defeat that virus. We can defeat authoritarianism. And if you allow me just to explain why, in Hungary, we not only experience hate campaigns, which is part of the propaganda, but we also experience an exodus of Hungarians who want to live in the free world. Although Orbán's propaganda says that Russia and China, these are the developing, beautiful societies, examples, illiberal examples, but for some reason, those close to 1 million Hungarians out of the 9.5 million now, who left Hungary, they all went to the failing, rotten West that pictures Orbán as close to collapse, uninhabitable, no-go zones, and where men are giving birth and people are freezing death because they don't get Russian gas. So all this propaganda nonsense that Orbán's propaganda tells the Hungarians, young people who left Hungary, they don't believe, they didn't believe it. They went to work and live in Austria, in Germany, Switzerland, Great Britain, or America, and not to Moscow, Beijing, or Istanbul. So it is a threat to everyone if tenders are not won by the more efficient, more competitive companies, but by relatives. Then the economy is suffering. If the education system is there to manipulate people and not to enlighten our children, then you can see the difference between the PISA results of OECD countries. You can be very proud. Your results here in Poland, PISA results, are amongst the best ones. You achieved to grow to the level of the Scandinavian schools. Hungary, in the last 20 years under the rule of Orbán, 14 years Orbán, it was gradually worsening. There's always a deterioration of the education system, also the healthcare system, the economy, the infrastructure, everything. So a dictatorship is not only inconvenient, it's also bad for the economy, it's bad for living conditions, standard of living, bad for companies' competitiveness, because these companies are not competing for inefficiency, they compete in favoritism and how to enrich Orbán's family.
Thank you, Peter. So we started with, let's say, some major political problems with Orbán, but we are here talking also about the local governments. So the theme of this year's Congress is the future of the idea of the decentralization. So, of course, there is a strong connection between that you were talking about right now and the centralization process. So how do you think, where is the border between decentralization as a good process and where should we stop to not go too far? I mean, we all experienced the pandemics, the financial crisis, right now the war in Ukraine. So it is good to have a strong country, strong government, but where is the limit of their power? And what should be done by the local governments and how you can act in this way in a country like Hungary right now?
It's interesting because we all live in a united Europe, and one of the problems, as Mr. Kissinger many decades ago pointed out, that if he wants to talk to Europe, there's no one to call. Who do I call if I want to speak to Europe? That's what Mr. Kissinger asked. So at the same time, we have a leadership issue on the European level, and we need a unified response to external threats like the Chinese issues, environmental issues, or the war in Ukraine. Yes, there we need a strong leadership And this is nothing new, by the way. Part of Poland, the entire Hungary, we were all part of the Austro-Hungarian monarchy. From 1870 to the First World War, this dualist state, as one of the first integrations in Europe, it operated on different levels of centralization. 3 levels were completely centralized: finances, foreign policy, and military issues, defense. So defense, finances, and the foreign service, diplomacy. These 3 factors were centralized and common, even had just one ministry. All the others had separate ministries in Austria and Hungary. Just imagine that after so many years of cooperation, the United Europe didn't get that far. We don't have one embassy in the almost 200 states in the world, one European embassy. Instead, we have Polish embassies, Hungarian embassies, Slovenian embassies, etc. So there's one even economic reason and efficiency reason why we could centralize on the level of European Union and save. Similarly, environment, by the way, it threatens all of us the same way. So this one can be made more efficient by centralization. Defense, definitely. We need one united, strong Europe, for sure. And finances is already happening with the introduction of the euro. And I know that you are now turning towards the euro. Unfortunately, Mr. Orbán has a lot more flexibility with using his own currency, by devaluating his own currency. That is a threat to Hungary, but it would also be good for us to introduce the euro. So anyway, that's about the centralization on the European level. But it's also a very European idea. It's also a very Western idea that decisions must be made at the level where the effects will be experienced. So the idea of self-governance, the idea of municipalities is an inherently European idea. If something belongs to our city, I don't want somebody in Budapest or Brussels, for that matter, to make decisions instead of us. So that's why it is a threat to our communities in Hungary that Mr. Orbán is centralizing everything. Not centralizing in Brussels, but centralizing in Budapest, centralizing for his government. And this one, for Orbán, is also a power game. In the same way as he manipulates media, he manipulates elections, laws, the economy. He also wants to control municipalities. More than 90% of Hungarian municipalities are led by Fidesz, Orbán's party. And they directly penalize those municipalities that do not elect Fidesz politicians, Fidesz mayors. My city was openly threatened last year that if they re-elect me as a mayor, then the government will not cooperate at all with my city, Hódmezővásárhely. Sorry for the long name. Just imagine that a year ago, in response to the energy crisis, the Hungarian government didn't increase normative support for municipalities, instead gave them support on an individual basis, which means those municipalities who supported Fidesz, they got a lot of help, a lot of money, millions of euros. And the only one who didn't receive a penny was my municipality. So I was the former prime minister candidate. I'm still an openly critical mayor towards the government. So there were a few other cities, rich ones, even smaller ones. But of the 25 big cities in Hungary, my city, Hódmezővásárhely, was the only one who didn't receive nothing at all. So these decisions are made on a political basis. In Hungary, it's also common that all sports associations are directly controlled by Fidesz politicians. Wrestlers, basketball players, tennis club, etc. On the national association is headed by ministers and prominent Fidesz members of the parliament, etc. They try to control the entire civic society. They also try to control municipalities. So support is not given on a normative basis. They even take away our tax revenues. Formerly, each city had the opportunity to levy taxes on certain things, and they got their share from tax revenues. Orbán took that away, and instead he gave subsidies based on political decisions. If he likes the municipality, it gets a lot of money. If he doesn't like it, it doesn't get even permits, even approvals. Sometimes, even projects funded from European money is stopped by the government. Last year, we wanted to insulate energy efficiency projects of schools, and the government just stopped the project, and we couldn't complete it because there's the public procurement process. There is a step where the government had to say yes, and then it goes public, and they just never said yes. So it's on a very political basis, and I believe that the European idea of local governments is that the government should not interfere in the life of local people.
Thank you, Peter. We have 3 minutes left, so unfortunately one last question. You describe yourself as a right-wing Christian disappointed by Fidesz. So I'm also really curious about one thing, because you spent a few years in the United States, also in Canada. So tell me how your American experience helped you to become the better mayor, better politician, and to build a civic society in your city.
I'm an economist by trade, so I'm very proud of all those results that we achieved by just making city governments and the operation of city services more efficient. And that we are more efficient users of energy, but also more efficient in using workforce. We are using mobile apps for even trash collection and cleaning up the city. So there are many ways that I'm sure you're also discovering here in Mikolajkiból today in this conference. This is about efficiency, and it's good for everyone. But there's also one specific idea that I also am very proud to spearhead in Hungary. I'm a pioneer of anti-corruption in many aspects. And this is a very American idea as well. All of my campaigns, and the first time I won in an election, it was 6 years ago. And before, I was a non-partisan civilian, not a politician, a father of 7, a churchgoer Catholic with a living faith. I had nothing to do with politics. So when I started at this race, I collected money from the community, and also I added my own money to this campaign. But since I was receiving donations from the public, I felt that it was just right to tell them exactly how much I received and what did I spend it to. So probably the first in Hungarian history, I published my campaign financing statements, all documented with invoices, bank transfers. So it was totally made public. Even anonymous donations were listed, the amount, the date, and that I was receiving it in an envelope, for example, in my mailbox, etc. So it was all very transparent, and this was just the first one. Then I won the next election a year and a half later, and I did the same thing. Then we had this opposition primary elections, which I won, and I did the same thing. I published everything online. And first time in Hungarian history, 2 years ago, our campaign was partly financed by donations coming from the United States. As I was told by Hungarians living in the United States, the government is attacking us that we receive foreign aid, and even corruption and treason, etc. But you know what is funny that we published? Just imagine this. It was a 2.5 billion Hungarian forint campaign, 42,000 lines. It is published. It's on my website. It's on a party movement's website. 42,000 lines. Donations, expenditures, everything is there. The Secret Service made an inquiry twice. Tax Authority made an inquiry. The Personal Data Protection Office made an inquiry, and also the National Exchequer, an authority to control public money. They all made inquiries into our party financing, and they couldn't come up with any problems, any corruptions, any irregularities. Just imagine this. Nothing comparable happened ever in Hungarian history. So I'm very proud that the idea of transparency, which I learned in the United States, was now introduced into Hungarian culture. I also have to admit that even the opposition is very critical of many practices that we do, because they do not like transparency either. Many opposition-led cities are just as corrupt as Fidesz-led cities. And I can also tell you that most likely they cooperate in these cities, because otherwise the government would at least have the incentive to investigate these opposition cities, but they don't. Most likely they get their share from corruption in these municipalities, and vice versa. Most likely the opposition is not very critical of certain corruptions in Fidesz, because they also have their share in this. So the transparency and anti-corruption is a totally new idea in Hungary, and I'm very proud that this one I brought home from America. So I think it's very important that real Christian values, transparency, the acceptance of others, and also you asked if a conservative, and we discussed it previously, that how come as a Christian, myself as a Catholic, I don't only oppose abortion, I also oppose divorce. I'm a strong opponent of divorce, but I would never force my views on an otherwise secular society. I know in Poland that I, as a Catholic, and you as a society, that even on a weekday afternoon, if I go into a church in Poland, it's open and high probability there is a mass going on inside. This is not the case in Hungary. We are much less devout Christians. Much of the society, and I would say more than 3% by far, is atheist, or at least if they declare themselves Christians, but they don't practice any religion. So in our society, there is a common understanding that current abortion laws are accepted by all. And I, as a Catholic, I didn't want to challenge that consensus in the society. I have my own private belief and faith, but I believe that we have to convince people that abortion, for example, is not a birth control measure. And this is my conviction, that I will do everything to convince the society that anything is better than abortion, but I would not have a legislation on it. Because again, as a Catholic, we cannot force our views on everybody else in the society. If you want, this can be considered a liberal standpoint, but I believe that personal conviction, and I have to tell you that, again, divorce for me is unacceptable, as a Catholic, but as a reality in the society, I have to, of course, not interfere in many other people's lives. So that's the difference.
Yeah, okay, thank you. I'm afraid we are run out of time, but please, if you want to meet this brave man, I think you will have a chance somewhere on the corridor in the other room. So, ladies and gentlemen, please thank me. It was a truly honor and a great pleasure to talk with you, Peter. Peter Márki-Zay.